So I'm checking with Lorraine to know when we will have also our two opening speakers, our keynotes.
Yes, we are still just waiting for Minister Cho and Rosalind van der Vlies to join us.
Okay.
Hopefully they will do so in a few seconds.
Mm-hmm. And I think we are gone live already.
Yes. Sorry,
okay,
but I think it's then we can get ready. Can you see us then, Martina? Perfect.
I just checked also on the YouTube channel if it's working. Not sure.
Does it work now? To refresh the page?
Yeah. So hello also to Salomé, Audrey, Tian Pham. And I think Alexandra. Amaya, hi. Good. So Lorena, I will wait for your go to start.
Mm-hmm. Yes, unfortunately, we are missing our two starting speakers still. I hope they will join us soon.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, we'll have to go and see when they arrive.
Yes.
Maybe what time is it? We can leave it again another 2 minutes.
Yeah.
Sorry for everyone who's waiting.
Hi, Martina.
Hello, Ted. Nice to see you.
I'm finally here.
Thank you for being here. Thank you so much.
Problem. Looking forward to hearing from everybody.
Yes, it's going to be a very interesting workshop. We are all very excited. We have been working on this for a few months now, so it is harvesting time.
So as Martina said, we are still missing two speakers, but maybe we can start and then we will then go to the video, and if we still don't have our speakers, then
I would ask Laura Hetel actually what we should do, and maybe also if we have Cécile Lecombe from British Columbia to know if we can give the floor, or maybe we can start with the video of Cristina Russo. So I will open and then we will start like this. Okay. So good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to our Next Generation Cities workshop. This is the last workshop of the EU-Canada Program Level Cooperation Task Force. This is an initiative that has been launched now 4 years ago that gathered 15 Canadian funding agencies and provinces and the European Commission to better identify future priority of cooperation and to try to harmonize programs. This is the last workshop I was saying. We started with a workshop on pain research, followed by a workshop on antimicrobial resistance in animals. And just last week, we had a very interesting workshop on equity, diversity, and inclusion in artificial intelligence. And so we close this experience with this workshop today. And we would like to really thank all the organizing committee. We should have been all in Vancouver today because this is virtually hosted by the government of British Columbia. Unfortunately, we're only on Zoom, so we need to reorganize hopefully in a couple of years. And I would like really to thank Cécile Lecombe from British Columbia and also from the agencies, Danielle Saint-Jean and Marisa Creatore from CHR, from SHERC, Susan Bord and François Pelletier, Noel Burns from NSERC, and Terry Romano from NRC. We have had a huge organizing committee, and everyone has been very, very active. Also from the European Commission side, I would really like to thank Laura Hetel from the European Commission and Pavel Suchon as well. And of course, also Christos Frankiokis, sorry if I didn't pronounce it well. So without further ado, I would like to start with a video intervention of Maria Cristina Russo that will introduce our 3 days of workshops, where today we are going actually to discuss the policies and priorities on next generation cities, both at policy level from the European Commission and Canadian agencies, and projects and initiatives for climate neutral, smart and healthy cities and research in Canada and Europe. Tomorrow, the researchers that have been selected will work together to identify future priorities for cooperation that will be presented from few rapporteurs on the 3rd days to representatives of the funding agencies, really to help in identifying future priorities to work together and how to finance these future priorities on next generation cities together. So please, Lorena, you can start the welcoming video from Maria Cristina Russo, who is actually the director of the Directorate for International Cooperation of the European Commission.
Great. Here it is in a few seconds. Oops. Hope everyone can see.
Good morning to all of you in Canada, and good afternoon to the colleagues in Brussels. When I speak about Canada, I always underline that Canada is a key partner for Europe, a partner with which we can work well and achieve a lot. Scientific cooperation between the EU and Canadian researchers comes naturally. It can be considered as organic, and EU and Canadian institutions have developed long-standing structural links. Also, the EU and Canada share basic values of ethics, integrity of research, openness and transparency, and evidence-based policy making, which make them natural partners. By cooperating on science, the EU and Canada we have the power to bring together some of the world's best research resources. A global approach in research and innovation is the only way to address more effectively the global challenges that we're facing today in relation to climate change, environment, pandemic, and to navigate the digital and green transition. Horizon Europe will be our main tool for addressing the global challenges in research and innovation. It's a new research and innovation program of the EU. It will be launched soon. It will have a duration of 7 years with a very large budget of more than 95 billion euros. And what is important to say is that Horizon Europe is open to the participation of researchers from all over the world, with specific attention to researchers from our strategic partners, such as Canada. One of the important features of Horizon Europe is that it will be structured on the basis of missions, of specific missions which are aimed at increasing the effectiveness of funding by pursuing clearly defining targets. The basic idea of the missions is to better link EU research and innovation to society and to the citizens' needs in order to deliver strong economic, social and environmental impact. We have 5 missions in Horizon Europe. The missions will relate to the adaptation to climate change, to cancer, to climate neutral and smart cities, to healthy oceans, seas, coastal and inland waters, and last but not least, to soil, health and food. These challenges are very important for Europe, and we believe that they are also very important for Canada. Therefore, Horizon Europe will offer plenty of opportunities for EU and Canadian researchers to team up, conducting excellent research and addressing global societal challenges together. Almost all the topics in the first work program of Horizon Europe will be open to the participation of Canadian researchers and innovators. In addition, in several cases, there will be actions which will be specifically targeted for the cooperation with Canada. That, the Horizon Europe program, coupled with the fundamental support which is provided by the Canadian New Frontier Research Fund, will allow us to sustain our bilateral cooperation and promote structural links between our respective research institutions. Last but not least, Canada is one of the potential candidates for association to Horizon Europe under its new rules. Now, this workshop is very relevant for seeing in concrete cases how we can deepen our cooperation, in particular considering that there is a specific mission in Horizon Europe, as I mentioned, on climate neutral and smart cities. My colleague Rosalinde van der Wiels will provide you for more details on these specific possibilities. And I would like now to conclude by thanking all the stakeholders and members of the scientific community, both from the EU and Canada, for participating to this event. And I would like to wish you very rich and productive discussions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everybody. We are delighted to have had the video intervention from Maria Cristina Russo. We are actually pretty much in advance, and I would like to ask Laura if we have Minister George Cho connected.
I haven't seen him.
Yes, actually, yes. I
Yes?
see now I am admitting everybody. So I see that Minister Cho is now connecting.
Great.
So
I will stop sharing the screen.
So thank you very much to British Columbia for being in the organizing committee, and also to offer to host us in Vancouver in case we would have been available to travel at this time. So we have now started our day with a video message from the Director of International Cooperation, Maria Cristina Russo, and I would like to leave the floor to the Honorable George Cho, Minister of State for Trade in British Columbia. The floor is yours. So I see that.
Can you?
Yes, hello,
can
Minister
you hear
Cho,
me?
hello. Yes, we can. We cannot see you, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me put on. Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay,
How's that?
fantastic. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. Wow. Hi. Wow. Good day,
Welcome.
everyone. It's an honor and pleasure to be with you virtually. And it have been great to see all of you in Vancouver in person as originally planned, but the pandemic has gotten in the way. I'm pleased to speak to you from Vancouver, British Columbia, on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish peoples with whom we share this land and their hospitality. And I would like to extend greetings from the Premier of British Columbia, John Horgan, as well as Minister of Jobs, Economic Recovery and Innovation, Ravi Kahlon. Allow me to start by acknowledging the presence of the Honorable Kathleen McKenna, Canadian Minister of Infrastructure and Communities, and our distinguished partners from the European Commission. I would like to thank the organizer for today's event and for inviting me to participate. My primary responsibility as Minister of State for Trade is to strengthen trade and investment in the face of global changes and challenges. With this event, I see tremendous opportunity to strengthen our trade with the European Union. As the largest harbor city in Western Canada, Vancouver is Canada's gateway to the Asia Pacific and a primary trade route for Western North America, which helps to support trade with Europe. British Columbia has strong economic ties with Europe and supported Canada's ratification of the Canada-European Union Comprehensive Economic and Trade Agreement. Europe is British Columbia's fifth largest export destination. Since the ratification of CETA, export from Canada to the EU increased from 52% in 2018 to 57% in 2020. British Columbia's Economic Recovery Plan, called Stronger BC, provides more than $1.5 million in funding for relief and economic recovery programming to British Columbians, businesses, and community across the province. This includes investment that position British Columbia for future economic growth in areas such as mass timber, agricultural, and clean technologies. This will be our focus in the coming months, working with the business community, municipal governments, Indigenous community, and people across the province on economic recovery and growth that will create new markets, stimulate demand for low GHG goods, and support the development of an inclusive, sustainable, and innovative economy. Additionally, as we work to rebuild our economy, and as we continue to develop our cities, we have an opportunity to do it in a way that builds upon BC's existing climate leadership. In 2018, our government unveiled our environmental plan called Clean BC. Our Clean BC plan has put us on a new path to reduce carbon pollution and use more clean, renewable energy. And on April 20th, as part of the provincial budget, our government announced new investment into Clean BC. $506 million in new spending will be allocated to support Clean BC initiatives in clean transportation, energy efficient buildings, and GHG emissions reduction across the province. This additional investment will continue to position the province as a global leader in innovation and implementation of climate action commitments. Last week, our government introduced new legislation to support the operation of an investment company called InBC Investment Corp. InBC is a new, first of its kind, $500 million strategic investment fund that will provide BC-based businesses with the capital to position our province as a front runner in the post-pandemic economy. It will make investment in small and medium-sized businesses through a triple bottom line mandate that equally values and prioritizes our people and the planet with the profits. With this focus, InBC will help grow the BC economy in an innovative, sustainable, and inclusive way. In closing, BC and the EU share many of the same economic priority and values, particularly around growing the green economy of the future, whether in zero emission buildings, cleaner transportation, reducing carbon pollution from industry, or reducing emissions from waste. These are all areas where we can work closely with European partners, governments, institutions, and companies to share expertise and forge new partnerships. CETA will increase our economic ties and move forward our shared area of interest and economic and social values. I look forward to the discussion taking place today in the next couple of days and to learn more about your ideas on how to promote research cooperation on next generation cities to make our cities climate neutral, smart, and healthy. And I hope to welcome you to British Columbia in the very near future when it's safe to do so. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Cho, for your opening words. Indeed, we are really accepting the invitation eagerly. And for us, it has been very important to be really in the position to team up with British Columbia. Traditionally, Europe has a tradition of working more with the East Coast, but especially on this specific topic, we share a lot of research and innovation and policies on next generation cities. So it was a natural partnering for doing this. So thank you very much, Minister Cho, and we wish you a good day. So while we are waiting for Rosalinde van der Vlies, the Director of the European Commission for the Clean Planet Directorate, I would like just to recall the objectives and the structure of this workshop. So for us, it is very important to bring together Canadian and European research program decision makers and researchers to establish the way forward to cooperate in the next generation cities. So these 3 days together, we really hopefully will come out with a new path for collaboration. And we hope that our research will help us in identifying a list of key recommendations and actions for advancing the cooperation between Europe and Canada on climate neutral, smart and healthy cities. So this is really an opportunity for Canadian and European researchers to identify where their interests are aligning and also to see how to pursue pathways of funding researchers both in Europe and in Canada. So it is very important for us to have here different services from the European Commission as well as the three councils, the government of British Columbia and the government of Quebec, plus NRC and different other funding agencies in Canada, because we can see different levels of cooperation and we will make sure that our researchers and innovators will find ways to advance research, thanks also to this work that we are pursuing together. So I would like to see if actually Director van der Vlies has connected. I will ask Laura if she's there.
I haven't seen her coming in. Neither did Bella, I think. So unfortunately, yes.
She's about to connect. I see Martina online. Yes. Martina.
Hello.
Great. Hello, everyone. Rosalinda is about to connect indeed. Just a moment, please.
Okay. Martina, not me, the other. Okay. Okay. So we just wait these few seconds before leaving the floor to the last opening words for this welcome session. I thank you, Minister Cho, that is still with us so early in the morning. Thank you.
I think Director van der Vlies is with us now. Martina.
Okay, so welcome Director Rosalinde van der Vlies from the European Commission, from the DG Research and Innovation in the Directorate Clean Planet. we would like to leave the floor for the opening words for this Next Generation Cities workshop between Europe and Canada.
Thank you very much for this invitation to open. It is a real privilege and pleasure for me to be here with you today. And I'm very glad to see that the fourth and last workshop under the Canada-EU program Level Task Force deals with cities, and in particular with next generation cities. And for us here in the European Union, the title of the workshop resonates very well with our Next Generation program, which is a 675.2 billion euro program to help the member states set on the path to a greener and more resilient recovery. And together with our European Green Deal policy, we have an opportunity to build a greener, fairer, and a more resilient society. And we should really seize this opportunity now. And of course, cities are a make or break pieces of the puzzle when it comes to achieving the European Green Deal objectives of climate neutrality by 2050. And therefore, we are here to take the cities to a next level. We also need to transform our approach to research and innovation in urban issues. And under Horizon Europe, our new framework program for research and innovation, we really took this different approach by approaching climate neutrality for cities in a cross-sectoral way. In the past, we have been funding lots of research and innovation actions, really focusing on only one sector without making the linkages between these sectors. So for our new framework program, we really want to go for a cross-sectoral approach because we really need to accelerate the green transitions that we need in order to become climate neutral. We are also going more local. We have really realized that working in the European Commission, we have offered a lot of services to cities, but what we maybe didn't do enough is really to listen to the needs of the cities, to really take a demand-driven approach to our activities. So starting from the needs and the ambitions of the cities, we can work to dismantle the barriers that still exist for the cities on their road to this green and more healthy transition. So I would like to highlight very quickly two specific initiatives that we are launching. And in the next sessions, you will hear much more on the state of play of these activities. The first is the mission on 100 climate neutral cities by 2030. This is really a novel approach that we are taking under Horizon Europe. And you will hear more in the session on how we, in this mission, will take this demand-driven approach forward. And of course, research and innovation will be a key component, but also then we need to link much more than in the past the results from the research and innovation in order to further scaling up and deploying to make sure that our citizens can really then benefit from the solutions that we have been investing in. The second initiative, it is a very successful initiative that we are doing together with the European member states. It is a partnership to drive urban transitions. And again, here, keywords are a cross-sectoral approach, basically making sure that all the individual sectoral solutions can come together on our path to climate neutrality. The European Union and Canada, we have joint commitments and joint goals. And politically, of course, we are very committed to deliver on the Paris Agreement and also on the Sustainable Development Agenda. Our cities already collaborate either bilaterally or via the global networks, such as the Covenant of the Mayors and the C40. Our research communities have very strong and long-lasting ties. So I'm very much looking forward to reading the results of the joint reflections and how our scientific collaboration can better serve our cities, our lives, and ultimately our global future. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Director van der Vlies, and thank you, Minister Cho, for being here for us for this opening session. I would like then to actually move to the first session on the policies and the priorities, where we are going actually to present the state of play on EU instrument. We will start from the European priorities and directions. And I would like to invite Philippe Froissart, Head of Unit for the Future Urban and Mobility Systems from the Directorate General Research and Innovation of the European Commission to present the mission on climate neutral and smart cities. Hello, Philippe.
Thank you very much, Martina. Good afternoon. Long time no see. Can
yes.
you hear me? You hear me well? You see me well?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
Perfectly.
So I would like to wish a very good afternoon to my colleagues in Europe, and a good morning. And yes, indeed, good morning to the colleagues in Canada. It's very much a pleasure for me to participate to this workshop. And as presented by Rosalind earlier on, I would like to say a few words on the new activity that we are working on and that we are developing at the moment in the Commission, in DG Research Innovation, which is the Climate Neutral and Smart Cities mission. So it's very much a new animal that we are developing, and that is certainly a change with respect to what we have been doing in the past. And I'd like to go through the story of the development of this initiative with you in the next few slides. So can I have the next slide, please? So I think we need to go through the context first if we want to understand a little bit more the scope of the mission for climate neutral and smart cities that we are developing. And the context, the policy context, is very much linked to the European Green Deal initiative that is one of the biggest priority of the present Commission. And the objective and the ambition of the European Green Deal is there. It's to have basically the continent being climate neutral by 2050. And we have a number of intermediate targets in 2030 and leading to 2050. But what is very clear is that cities will have an essential role to play if we want to meet this target of climate neutrality by 2050. Why? Because most of the people living in Europe are actually living in cities. And I think we have about 75% of the population presently living in cities in Europe. And the situation in the world is actually not very different than that. And it's increasing very much more, actually rapidly, in developing countries than it is in Europe or in Canada. But the picture is that it will increase even further in the next few years. In 2050, we expect in Europe to have 85% of the population living in cities. And cities are the place where the economy is taking place, in the sense that more than 2/3 of the GDP is produced in cities. And as a consequence, most of the emissions of greenhouse gases are actually located in cities. That means that the national policies, the international, the European policy initiatives on reduction of greenhouse gases, if they are taken at national or international, European levels in our case, have to be implemented at local level. And cities have to play a big role in making sure that the continent will become climate neutral. They are essential actors that we need to involve in this process of climate neutrality. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, this is an artistic view of where we stand in Europe when it comes to initiatives that are actually, most of them are driven by the Commission and the Commission services. When it comes to programs targeting cities for climate neutrality, but not only, also for enabling their transition towards digital and so on. And what you can see, I'm not going to go through the different steps and the different boxes that we have on this slide, but what you realize is that politely, we have a fragmented landscape. That means that for cities, it is complicated to find its way, not only through the funding opportunities that are available in Europe, but through the different programs and initiatives that are available to help actually those cities develop a coherent strategy for reaching climate neutrality in a foreseeable future. But that's the situation we're in. And all these programs are actually contributing to their extent in a way, in a sectoral approach, mainly for most of them, to help cities. The problem is it's very difficult for cities to take the benefit of these initiatives and to develop a coherent and approach for climate neutrality. So that's where, and that's why the objective of the cities came. And if I can have the next slide, I will explain to you what are the objectives of the mission. So first of all, the cities mission is a work that started with the launch of Horizon Europe in 2019, because there were 5 mission areas that were identified as part of the Horizon Europe legal base. And one of them was for climate neutral and smart cities. And we established what we call the mission board, that is composed of a number of high-level experts that reflected and came up with a proposal for this mission, which was to have by 2030 100 climate neutral cities that would be developed and that would actually reach this target of climate neutrality in a process that would involve their citizens. And I think that was a very essential dimension of the mission, that was to connect at a very early stage of the development of the concept their citizens, in order to ensure the buy-in and the success of the initiative. What are the objectives of the mission? I mean, they have been revised a little bit recently, but to a large extent, the main objective is indeed to identify 100 cities in Europe that would commit, that would pledge to become climate neutral by 2030. And that's not a mean ambition, because 2030 is tomorrow. When we look at the scale of changes that need to be put in place in order to reach climate neutrality, those 100 cities will be indeed very brave to come forward. But we are hopeful that indeed we will identify among the European cities at least 100 cities that will commit to this ambitious target. And this is not the only objective of the mission. The second objective, which is even more ambitious, is to ensure that these cities, these 100 cities, will also act as experimentation and innovation hubs for all other cities in Europe, to enable them to become climate neutral, not by 2030, but by 2050, and therefore to respect the objective and the ambition of the European Green Deal to have the continent climate neutral by 2050. Next slide, please. So how are we going to achieve that? Well, as Rosalind said in her intervention, we want to have a process that is demand-driven. That means that we are not going to impose solutions and a model and a methodology to the cities. We are going to ask cities how they are going to reach that objective of climate neutrality. And it goes without saying that cities will develop a methodology that is the best suited to their own local needs and constraints. So this is a demand-driven process, and I think this is something which is very important to stress. It's also a process that cannot be restricted to local environment, and the local policymakers and the decision makers will have an essential role to play, because the changes will have to be implemented locally, but they will have to be supported at different levels. At national level, because there will be opportunities and support that might be coming from national authorities. There are also barriers and obstacles and regulations that will need to be addressed at national level, and in the case of Europe, at European level. So the European Commission in particular will have an essential role to play to ensure that the commitment of those cities are implemented in good time. So the multi-level governance approach of the cities mission is essential. And it's essential for what? Because it will also be helpful for them to access funding and financing. So it's not only about funding through grants, it's about also financing and financing opportunities that can be made available at national level, international level, through instruments that are already deployed and available to a large extent for many of them, like those that, for instance, are available in Europe through the European Investment Bank. So the citizens, no, sorry, if I can have the same slide, I'm going to say a little bit more. The instrument that we want to use for the implementation of this ambitious target is what we call the Climate City Contract. The Climate City Contract is a commitment, is a formal commitment between the different actors that will play a role in the implementation, the local authorities, the national authorities, and the European Commission. And the essential components of the Climate City contract is also the citizens, because citizens will have to be involved at every step of the way for the preparation of the Climate City contract and for the implementation. Because, for instance, if you take cities and climate neutrality, city authorities have a role to play, have a budget that they can spend on to change the way their city operate, but citizens and businesses will have a big role to play as well. I mean, just to give you an example, the cars that you will buy in the future might actually be a zero-emission car, but it will not be bought by the city. It will be bought by you as a citizen. So it will be through your investment that you will have an impact on the greenhouse gas emission that will be coming from the cities. The building that you are living in, it will be refurbished partly through subsidies and support that might come from local authorities or national authorities, but it will be mainly from the investment that will be coming from the residents or the owners of the building. So again, citizens have an essential role to play for ensuring that the Climate City contracts are implemented fully and successfully. And of course, research innovation has a role to play. And that was highlighted by Rosalie in her intervention. But in the case of the city's mission, research innovation will not play necessarily the main role for the first objective of the mission, which is the deployment of the Climate City contracts by 2030, because by 2030, the target is so short that we will be talking mainly about deployment of existing solutions, but rather more for the second wave of cities that will come with the ambition of becoming climate neutral by 2050. And there, it will be important to provide to those cities and the citizens solutions that are innovative and that fully respect the objective and the ambition of those cities. Okay, if I can have the next slide, and I believe this is my last slide. So what about the international dimension? Because I'm talking about a mission which is deep-rooted in the European program, which is taking its objectives from the European programs and policies initiatives. But clearly what we do in Europe is of interest to other stakeholders and countries in the world. Not only because we want to promote what we do in Europe, this is not the process that we have in mind. What we want to have and what we want to establish also, and thanks to the mission, is a process where we can facilitate the two-way cross-border flows of knowledge. It's about us sharing information with our international partners on how we go about climate neutrality, but also for us learning from the good practices that have been developed in other countries and other cities in the world. And that is a cooperation and an exchange that we would like to have between cities, for sure, but there are already quite a number of networks that exist across the world, linking cities and giving them the possibility and the opportunity to exchange information. But we would like also to have this exchange and this sharing of good practices between national authorities. And there, I think this is something that is very important for Europe and for some of the third countries that we talk to. And I believe this is something that would be interesting for Canada and for our cooperation between Europe and Canada. Because at the end of the day, this might be an opportunity to set up, to identify areas of common interest and set up joint activities between national authorities that would be responsible for the implementation of the success of the mission. And I think I would like to close my intervention here. And that might actually be a nice way for introducing the next speaker. Thank you very much for your attention. And of course, if you have any question, I would be very happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Philippe, for your thorough presentation of the mission. That is actually really one of the novelties of Horizon Europe, a new way to align and also to cooperate and do international cooperation. And another novelty, it is for sure a revision of the EU partnerships. And so we are really happy to have here with us today Margit Noh, that is the chair of the Driving Urban Transition into a Sustainable Future, to present the new partnership that is about to be presented. And we will have a short question and answer time just after Margit's presentation. Please, Margit, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me to this workshop and being able to share our plans and ideas also with quite a number of Canadian funding agencies. let me just get my presentation started. It would have been really a pleasure to join you in Vancouver. I would have loved to come to your city again, but I hope we will soon have the opportunities to then also meet. I will talk you through this partnership, which is not just starting from scratch, as was mentioned before, but before I really go into the matter of and the plans for the Driving Urban Transition Partnership, just let me walk you through quickly to where we come from, right? The JPI Urban Europe, the network that is now proposing the Driving Urban Transition Partnership, is operating since more than 10 years. And all the experiences that we have made are now really coming into play when we design the new partnership to already build on some conclusions from the previous years. Basically, we are, as already mentioned, an intergovernmental partnership where member states voluntarily join forces to cooperate and align and try to build critical masses for research and innovation in the area of sustainable urban development. We have started that in the 2010 around, when not much was talking about sustainable cities at that time, but the situation has changed substantially, and we're very happy that we have been able to build up a community and to contribute to those developments over the last years. The main activity that we implemented were so far 10 calls, then joint calls for research and innovation projects of different kind and different thematic priorities. The common ground was for all of them that they were very integrated approaches. The calls were, as mentioned, not into the silos and sectors, but we tried to uphold the importance of integrated approaches as the complexity of sustainable urban development really requires the understanding and the consideration of the interrelatedness of different aspects. At the same time, we have fostered co-design in these projects to a very wide extent. So out of these more than 110 projects, we have 180 urban living labs and action research sites. So field local areas where researchers, city administration, business, civil society organizations are co-designing local situations to a given problem. And they are cooperating across the countries, across the cities, to learn from each other and to test different technologies, solutions, approaches. So this co-design is one of the principles that we believe is very important to drive change, not just design or investigate new approaches on a rather academic perspective, but really hands-on provide feedback and input and create references in the cities. And we learned also that in order to create an impact, it's not only about the funding, right? It is also about building the communities, mobilizing the different actors, may that be city administration, real estate, infrastructure providers, local initiatives, so that we create a community, a multi-stakeholder community of practice that is interested in driving these transformations on different levels. And there were multiple of activities that we tested, new formats that we created, and that's what we can now also build upon. So the partnership is now an opportunity for the Urban Europe Network to take things further, to establish a long-term partnership also with the Commission. 4 out of these 10 calls were implemented already with the Commission. So this was more cooperation on different calls, but not a full-fledged continuation of this cooperation. So now we have the opportunity to run this as a joint program. And this is on the level of agencies, of ministries with a high national commitment for a multi-annual program. And I think this is the advantage that sort of we can offer, to establish a framework for cooperation that is not just for one call, not just for a few activities, but for a longer term period. And on the other hand, we build this program very much on the national and regional programs that already exist. The recovery funds, the climate change programs, the energy efficiency programs, they're all out there in our countries. And with this partnership, we have the opportunity to connect them, to establish a format for learning and exchange also among the agencies in terms of what formats are working, what kind of new instruments do we need to drive change and support change in the cities, because not in all cases the established formats are sufficient really to support cities in this transformation. So this is a common platform that we have created, and as you see, we have rather nearly all the European countries on board, other members and some associated partners from the European Union. We are very open to international cooperation, so please see there's also an invitation to engage in this process that is ongoing. The ambition of the partnership is to step up the game. We have spent so far about a bit more than 100 million. We are now aiming for more than 400 million for the next 7 years that we see as national commitments and the contribution from the European side. So I think we have the potential to speed things up, to build higher critical masses. And as you see in the vision, it's not aiming for research and innovation per se. It's not about the technological solutions or the socio-economic approaches. It's about creating change and driving this, translating the global strategies into local action. And that means that we need to mobilize all the different forces to jointly develop the skills and tools to make this change happen, as we are convinced we need to focus on the cities to make transformation happen at all and meet our sustainability goals. So the advantage and the basic understanding is coming from the global perspective. We all agree to the needs and to the challenges in a way, but when we look into the solution, they're very specific, right? In the neighborhoods, in the cities, in the municipalities, in our towns. So with supporting this co-design, this experimentation in our cities, different size and different situations, we create references and capacity to act. And we, as the partnership, as this environment, we want to capitalize on that and bring that back also to European and global policy making. And I think this offers room for international cooperation in different ways in order to benefit from these different situations, from different competencies, and jointly advance our cities. More specifically, what we are aiming at is to continue working on this innovation ecosystem that mobilizes, that invites all the different stakeholders to engage, listen very carefully to the cities, as was already mentioned earlier, to pick up their needs, their priorities, and let research and innovation respond to those challenges. The integrated approach is key for our point of view in order to increase the effectiveness of all these technologies and all these solutions that maybe they're already, but that miss maybe in some cases the embeddedness in the wider complexity of sustainability. And we want to make this available to all our cities, not only to the 100 cities that the mission is aiming at. We want to bring that to the thousands of cities that we need to meet the ambition of a climate neutral Europe and the world. Here, just a reference, we did a lot of consultation last year. Some of the reports are already available. So if you want to look into what the community says, pick them up and have a read. We are now in the phase of creating a roadmap and really planning things in detail. The thematic priorities, I think, resonate quite well what I've heard from the introductions and welcome notes, also from the Canadian side. We do have a program already on positive energy districts and neighborhoods to create districts that really transform the urban energy system, not only from the energy point of view, but this also connects a lot about governance, how we plan, how we design our cities, and how we can make them not only energy efficient, but on the whole, creating more energy than they consume. We have 2 new pillars that are under development at the moment. One is looking into the circular green economies, where we try to combine the greening of cities with the circularity and understanding how we can gradually approach a donut economy model and balance all these different resources and the needs and fulfill them with in the plenary boundaries. And the third pillar on 15-minute city is on rethinking urban mobility and space, going far beyond how we need to redesign our mobility systems, as this is really understanding how we can increase the multifunctionality of our neighborhoods, and how we can reduce the need for mobility in the first place, how we can deal with public spaces in new ways and balance the various needs. So the thematic development is ongoing. There is a strategic roadmap that is at the moment put forward for consultation. And this may be also interesting for you and Canadian organizations to have a look at, and feedback would always be appreciated. The portfolio of implementation measures,
just to let you know that you have 3 minutes to wrap up. Okay.
Yes, I'm nearly there.
Okay.
I'm nearly there. Just indicating what we're aiming at in the cooperation, right? It's, as said, not only about the calls, it is about many other activities that help us share this knowledge, synthesize, translate that into something that is useful for cities and policymakers. Likewise, international outreach is, of course, one of the priorities. And we will be happy to engage Canadian agencies and organizations in this process as well. There are ongoing consultation activities, stakeholder dialogues that are open also to your community, and your experts are very welcome to join these. So with that, just see this as an invitation and a teaser to engage in that partnership that hopefully, if everything goes well, will start into operation early next year, and then also start with first implementation measures. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margit, for this very interesting presentation. And as we have foreseen a 20 minutes break, which is pretty long. I would suggest maybe to shorten it a little and to leave the floor for a couple of questions, if any, for Philippe Fourassar and Margit Noll. So if you can raise your hand if you have a specific question before we take a few minutes break.
Martina, if I may.
Please, Philippe.
Because I'm looking at the chat. And I realized that there was a comment on the fact that not all activities were included in one of the slides, the terrible slide that I showed, where we are presenting all the different European initiatives targeting cities. That's correct. It's not even an exhaustive list of initiatives and programs that we have in Europe. The reason why we did not cover everything is because probably we did not have enough space on that page to provide all the references to those initiatives, and also we did not really want to scare everyone away from what we do at the moment. And but that said, I don't want to denigrate the purpose of these activities, and that's not the idea of the city's mission to say forget about these initiatives and these activities, and now there should be only one activity, which is the city's mission. Far from it. I think all these initiatives have their purpose, and they filled a gap, and they contributed to address a very specific issue, which usually is a sectoral issues, which could be digital, energy related, mobility related. What we would like to do is to bring a little bit more coherence in the package of offers and opportunities that we provide to cities. And what eventually we would like to do is to help cities identify these opportunities in a coherent way through the support that could be given to them, that would facilitate the access to these programs and opportunities. So to develop some kind of a one-stop shop platform, which would allow cities to, instead of knocking at 20 different doors, knocking at one door, which would dispatch their request or their issues to the right people. So yes, indeed, not all activities have been included, and I think even if we were trying to involve them, to put them all, I think beside the fact that space would be missing, we might also miss initiatives that are out there that we are not even aware of. that's the situation we live in, and that's not only a situation that we live in Europe, but also at national level. I'm fully aware that there are many opportunities that are available and that are provided to cities in specific countries that are very numerous. And the reason for that is because we work in a very sectoral approach at national level, at city level as well. And the mission is also one of the objectives of the mission is to change the way the cities are governed, to make sure that they address climate neutrality in a systemic way, and rather than in a sectoral way.
Thank you very much, Philippe. We also have a question from Jeff Brook.
Hi, thanks, Martina, and thanks for a great series of opening presentations. I think in a lot of ways, I'm convinced of these directions, as we probably all are. They're really good, and it's nice to put it all together. The integration is important. The working local, empowering local actions, all really good, involving citizens. And I imagine it's embedded in all these pictures, but I haven't really seen it explicitly mentioned in terms of monitoring progress. Lots of times, we do initiatives and they take, decades to see the benefits. And in that time, priorities move on, and accountabilities are then sort of lost in terms of, did we get what we intended? So what is the views of the speakers or others about the right balance of saying, we do want to monitor progress? I think a real key gap is being able to monitor progress quickly, whatever metrics there are that you want to monitor it. But I didn't really see that explicitly mentioned as part of these frameworks, as monitoring progress, which again, if you're encouraging citizens and others to engage, they want to see the fruits of their efforts quicker than often is seen. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Maybe because this is a general question that is also going to our Canadian speaker, I would maybe keep it for after the presentation of the Dr. Marisa Creatore, that is the Associate Scientific Director from CHR, Institute of Population and Public Health. So I wanted to have directly to European speakers questions right now, but maybe we can have first Marisa and then take it from there, if you do agree.
No, I won't. No, yeah, of course I agree. Yeah, I think it's a broad concept that hopefully we can revisit over the next.
Okay, so maybe we can have both an answer both from Philippe, Margit, and Marisa. And before leaving the floor to Marisa, Margit has also put some links for the JPI consultation, and we also have provided in the concept some links to initiatives that Philippe, of course, not exhaustive, but that he mentioned. So I would like to invite Marisa to maybe present the Canadian scenario before having a couple of more minutes of questions.
I'm just going to thank you very much, Martina. I'm just going to try to get this.
Okay, we can see it.
Can you can see my screen?
Yes, it is not full screen, but we can read anyways.
Let me see if I can fix that. Are you able to see my full screen now?
We see also your notes, but it's okay.
Oh, I can, let me try to fix that 1 second.
I think if you click on the small booklet on the right bottom panel, you should be able to present without showing your slides, your notes, sorry.
Let me try to. Now unfortunately I have everything showing. Hold on. One moment, one more time, and then I will do this. You said on the bottom
right, it's right next to where you clicked before. It just looks like a little book.
Yes, for some reason it's
You know, earlier you clicked on this presentation, and then you see if you click on this booklet that is right before on the bottom right.
How's this? Does this work now?
I don't see so anything.
No.
No, you don't see
But
it at
it's
all.
okay, even if we don't see full screen, Marisa, even if it is the same format as before, I think it can work, huh?
I also have it here, so I can also share it for you, Marisa, if you prefer, and then you tell me to switch.
For some reason, I've done this many, many times before, and for some reason it's, am I still sharing? Or have I stopped sharing?
You've stopped sharing.
Okay, one more time, because I know that I've done this successfully in the past. It's because I have my video.
Okay, we can see that now.
And now I just need to, well, I guess it doesn't matter if you can see what slides are coming, so this is fine. So thank you very much. Apologies for the technical challenges. And thank you for the introduction, Martina, and for chairing this program. And of course, thank you today to the organizers and our virtual hosts in British Columbia for organizing such an excellent workshop. I'd like to actually start, before I jump in, with a land acknowledgement. So I'm joining from Toronto, Canada, which is located on the traditional lands of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. And Toronto is actually on Dish with One Spoon territory. And the Dish with One Spoon describes how land can be shared to the mutual benefit of all its inhabitants. The idea is, in fact, within this agreement of taking only what you need and leaving some for everybody else and caring for the land seem to me to be very relevant for our conversations today about creating a healthier, more resilient and sustainable cities of the future. So I'm very happy to be here today to provide an overview of Canadian priorities and directions in next generation cities, climate neutral, smart and healthy research, and to share a little bit of information on relevant programs here in Canada. Oops. There we go. So you can see from the slide, and I wish that I could show you the full screen, but you can see from the slide the many Canadian federal and provincial government departments and organizations who've contributed to helping organize this workshop. So I'm, as Martina said, from the Canadian Institutes of Health Research, which is the Government of Canada's health research investment agency. And we are composed of 13 institutes, and we collaborate with partners and researchers to support the discoveries and innovations that improve our health and strengthen our healthcare system. I am joined, however, by my colleagues from our sister federal research funding agencies, the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council, as well as colleagues from Global Affairs Canada, the Government of Quebec, Government of British Columbia, Infrastructure Canada, and the National Research Council. And of course, as you've seen, we also are joined by a number of research experts today as well. So while I'm looking forward to highlighting some of our innovative Canadian programs in the presentation, I don't think we can really talk about the future of cities without acknowledging the impacts of COVID. And the effects that COVID has had on putting a spotlight on some of the big vulnerabilities and challenges that cities do seem to be uniquely facing, and perhaps what we can learn from that. Cities have felt the biggest impact of COVID, with 90%, at least that was the last, perhaps others have more up-to-date statistics, but the last statistic I saw from the UN was that 90% of cases have occurred in cities, and many of the harshest economic and social impacts have also been experienced in urban communities. So as has been mentioned in many of the presentations as well, healthy and sustainable and resilient cities requires a cross-sectoral lens. But the flip side of that is that virtually all sectors of our urban society have actually been impacted by COVID. And this is really important to highlight because it reveals the important reality about cities and about how interconnected and how interdependent all the different sectors and systems within cities are. So as it's been noted, although the majority of the world population lives in cities and cities drive economic growth, we heard that I think 2/3 of European GDP is generated through cities, and I believe it's even higher in Canada. And cities are hubs of innovation and creativity. They're very vulnerable due to the fact that you not only have dense populations, But the dependence of these populations are on interconnected systems such as transportation, food, communications, technology, complex supply chains, and often more delicate environmental ecosystems. So disruptions to any one of these interconnected systems can have large impacts, particularly, of course, on the most vulnerable communities and individuals. And I think, Philippe, you mentioned that 75% of Europe lives in cities. In Canada, interestingly enough, because we always think about Canada as predominantly wide open space, actually 82% of the Canadian population lives in cities. So the resilience and sustainability of our urban areas is a huge, massive driver of Canadians, Canada's health, well-being, but also prosperity and productivity. So I also think it's very important to say a few words about equity and what achieving the next generation cities means if we don't, well, or that in order to achieve next generation cities, we believe that we really have to have a central eye also on equity and a justice lens as well. And unfortunately, the COVID-19 health crisis has not only had wide impacts across cities, but I scratched out there, it's also had dramatically unequal impacts on cities and the populations within cities, and has really led to the exacerbation of longstanding inequities. And this is not just the disease, the virus itself, but many of the public health protection measures, although they of course are enacted in good faith to help reduce transmission, they have also heavily and more heavily impacted vulnerable groups due to isolation, loss of income, reduced access to social and other programs, including disruption to services such as addictions and mental health services. So in many ways, COVID has actually acted as a type of stress test for us to identify areas where our urban design, urban policies are vulnerable and for whom they are the most inadequate. So this is quite, I find, a very dramatic slide. And the purpose of the slide is just to extend the point of the last slide that, you know, I provided individual examples of inequities in specific groups or for different sectors. But the issue is that, of course, as we all know who are on this call, inequities tend to be clustered spatially in cities. Which can further entrench social, economic, and in the case of this slide, racial disparities for entire communities, which can generate further challenges in terms of design, policies, and interventions. For instance, the slide shows how cases of COVID in the city of Toronto, which is the map on your left, are concentrated in our racialized neighborhoods, and the map on the right is the proportion of Torontonians identifying as Black. In 2020. And so many of the people in these communities that are the darker green or the darker blue are essential workers who are in fact keeping the city going, but who are also bearing the brunt of the risk without many of the protections and infrastructure available in other communities. And how does that translate in terms of cities and in terms of research and innovation? Well, for instance, many of these communities in the dark shading are very underserved by public transit. So they are insufficiently serviced by public transit, and it results in very overcrowded routes. In the case of Toronto, many of these communities also lack infrastructure to encourage alternative modes of commuting or active transportation, such as cycling, cycle routes, bike paths. And there's less access to parks and green space in many of these communities to engage in safe, physically distanced outdoor activities. And finally, of course, in many of these communities, we are also looking at higher density housing, apartment buildings, or multi-generational housing, which has also worked to facilitate transmission of the virus. So others will speak to this later, but the purpose of this example is to highlight the importance of high resolution and disaggregated data so that we can actually identify some of these specific challenges at the neighborhood level. but also an understanding of local context. So I think Jeff was about to say, you know, think nationally, but act locally. And then, of course, what has been said numerous times already this morning, cross-sectoral collaboration to identify solutions. Scroll down. As has also been identified already today, these impacts that we're seeing predominantly to or very dramatically to urban communities are directly linked to our ability to meet the 2030 SDGs. So in the same way that we always talk about the 17 Sustainable Development Goals as interdependent, to bring about systemic change, we need to take a holistic cross-sectoral approach to recovery and transforming our cities. And we need to take this cross-sectoral approach with an eye to sustainability, resilience, and health. So again, I'm very happy to see how consistent the message linked to this slide has been with the previous speakers. I think we're on the same page with many of these ideas. So as we talk about recovery from COVID, and I know I've taken this sort of COVID lens, but this is the big picture of how do we transform and evolve and think about our next generation cities. As we talk about recovery from COVID, it also provides an opportunity for us to examine the status quo and strive to do things differently, so we're prepared for the next crisis. We're at a unique time, and that dotted line of attached to research and innovation, we're at a unique time where we can either continue with the status quo or we can move towards transformative changes. And if we want to make these transformative changes to address existing challenges and vulnerabilities, it will really require building on evidence of what works in which contexts and for which populations. And this, of course, will require research and innovation. And of course, this, again, beautifully, I'm very excited how much this really seems to be aligning with the programs that have already been presented by my European colleagues earlier today. So in Canada, there have been a number of notable federal investments that have been made that can be leveraged to achieve this transformative vision. As with the previous speakers, I can't go into all of them, but I'll just like to highlight a few of them in my few minutes today. So the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation has a national housing strategy, which they've launched, which is a 10-year, $70+ billion plan to create a new generation of housing in Canada. And this, of course, has had a very strong equity lens built into this program. Infrastructure Canada has also launched their Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, which I'll speak a little bit more about later in the presentation. Infrastructure Canada also has launched an active transportation strategy to coordinate active transportation investments that reflect best practice planning, design, regulations, and standards across levels of government in Indigenous communities, with not-for-profits, and with the private sector. And then the Public Health Agency of Canada has their Healthy Canadians and Communities Fund, which is aimed at funding interventions that target unhealthy eating, physical inactivity, and tobacco use. So these interventions are a critical, important first step, but actually, as Margit Noel presented, I think much more eloquently than I'm presenting on this quite simple slide, is that the investments are a first step. But to truly harness the potential of investments in urban communities, we need to inform those investments with research evidence and understanding of how to implement and how to scale these solutions so that others can benefit and that can secure sustainability of these investments and success and impact. And this, coming back to the evidence-based solutions, we tend to find those of us who have been in research before, one of the challenges, of course, in conducting research looking at solutions for urban environments as well as for other environments, is that often these research efforts fail when it actually comes down to implementing the solutions in real world contexts. And this, of course, is for many reasons that those of us here today understand: contextual realities, political contexts, complex systems, challenges of sustainability of long-term investments, and scalability challenges. However, this is where the concept of the science of implementation comes in. So we're defining implementation science as the study of what works in which contexts, for whom, and how. And it's about integrating and adapting tested interventions to different settings to maximize health and health equity. And in this diagram, you'll also see that this involves working directly across disciplines and across sectors, but also with policymakers and identified here as implementation partners. What's not on this slide, which I think was appropriately brought forward by Philippe in his presentation, is this also involves citizen engagement. So working directly with communities as well. So by and for the citizens. So, and I do want to, I guess it's appropriate to say I'm an epidemiologist by training, so I come with a health bias. But my goal through going through these slides and through this presentation is I hope that I can convince you, though, by the end that that population health really is a co-benefit, and that achieving a green, sustainable, and resilient next generation cities, we actually have to achieve all of these together, and that health is, we can't achieve one without the other. So forgive my health bias, but hopefully we see this as part of the holistic approach, and that you will be convinced by the end of this presentation. So one initiative in Canada that focuses on the points that I made about implementation and implementation science is the Canadian Institutes of Health Research's Healthy Cities Research Initiative. And our initiative aims to generate a substantial body of evidence and build capacity within the research and practice communities around designing and implementing evidence-based interventions in urban contexts to improve population health, well-being, and health equity. The Healthy Cities Research Initiative has multiple partners, including federal partners such as the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation, Infrastructure Canada, Statistics Canada, the Public Health Agency of Canada, and my two sister federal funding agencies as well, NSERC and SSHRC, Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council, and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. And the overall goal of this initiative is to catalyze systemic change. And we chose these words quite intentionally. Systemic is to flag the need for multi-sectoral policy solutions, and resilient cities to flag that the health of people is inextricably linked from a long-term perspective to resilience and sustainability of environments and systems that support us in our daily lives. So this is a multi-year, almost $50 million investment in research over 10 years. So along with a number of smaller annual launches, the Healthy Cities Research Initiative has two sort of marquee major funding opportunity investments. One is the Healthy Cities Research Training Platform, and the other is the Healthy Cities Implementation Science Team Grants. And I think both are relevant to our discussions today. So the training platform here on the left is really focused on, which we are doing in partnership with our colleagues at the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council and the Social Sciences and Humanities Research Council. The training platform is really to build capacity and a world-class training program in implementation science and solutions-based research to generate a stream of highly skilled graduates to fill the current gap in Canada and internationally in this space. The Healthy Cities Implementation Science Team Grants is focused on developing interdisciplinary, intersectoral teams that are going to be focused on understanding the systematic and equitable uptake and scale up of interventions in multiple urban environments. I would like to say a few words now about the Aging and Healthy Community and initiative. So in addition to the Healthy Cities Research Initiative, the Aging in Place Challenge and Canada Healthy Communities Initiative, oops, sorry, my mistake. I was looking at the wrong slide. Some additional innovation and response programs at the federal level include the National Research Council's Aging in Place Challenge and Infrastructure Canada's Healthy Communities Initiative. So the National Research Council's Aging in Place Challenge supports results-oriented projects that are intertwined with next generation cities objectives, so very aligned. And these projects focus on safety, connection, health and standards, including innovative living environments, mobility and transportation, data privacy and cybersecurity, and activities of daily living. Infrastructure Canada's Healthy Communities Initiative was launched by Minister McKenna in August 2020. And the first launch of this program had an overwhelming response with over 3,000 applications submitted and a value of approximately 350 million. This initiative funds projects focused on building and adapting safe and vibrant public spaces, such as playgrounds and community gardens, improved mobility options, such as bikeability, and digital solutions, such as virtual citizen engagement and geospatial mapping. As was mentioned before, I can't go into obviously all the various programs across the country that are focused in this space, but in addition to the two that I just mentioned, there are a number of great programs focusing on building healthy, sustainable, and resilient cities, including the 2020 Fonds de Recherche du Québec Nature et Technologie investment entitled Visage Municipal, to catalyze the development of research projects in partnerships between the scientific research community and the municipal sector in the province of Quebec. NSERC's Alliance grants support research projects led by strong complementary collaborative teams and encourage Canadian researchers to collaborate with intersectoral and international partner organizations to generate new knowledge and accelerate the application of research results to create benefits for Canada. And then, of course, it's already been mentioned, the New Frontiers in Research Fund's international stream supports joint funding calls with international agencies on topics of international relevance, as well as the participation of Canadian researchers within international teams. And this, Martina is coming to my second last slide.
Yeah.
So I do want to list here the contact information for our working group members, and I encourage you to get in touch with any of us if you would like more information on any of the specific programming. And these slides will be shared with you. And finally, and this is my last slide, Martina, I do want to thank you for the invitation to be able to speak to Canada's continued efforts in this space in urban research. And just, I guess, to close, to say that, workshop events like this are so valuable for us in supporting these collaborations, which are critical to addressing global challenges such as this one. And we really look forward to continuing our very valuable partnership with the European Commission and look forward to the conversations over the next 2 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Marisa. Thank you also for the beautiful land acknowledgement to start with and all the programs presented. I think that in a way you have also answered Jeff question. So if Jeff, it's okay with this and there are no other questions, maybe we can have a 5 minutes break. We can shorten it so we will finish on time. We know that it's very challenging to be online all the time, so we are trying to keep it tight, even if all the interventions are very, very interesting and are really setting the scene for the work of tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So please let us know if there is any really pressing questions. Otherwise, I don't see raised hands. So see you in 5 minutes. And I will leave the floor. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, Jeff is actually stating that implementation of science involves also involves monitoring, which is and involves monitoring change. And we will acknowledge this, and I hope this is one of the thematics that will come up from our discussion tomorrow as well. Okay, see you in 5. Thank you. Okay, so I think that the 5 minutes are coming to an end. So I kindly ask you to reconvene or start reconvening. We still have 30 seconds, more or less. And thank you very much for shortening the break. I would like now to leave the floor for the moderation of the second session to Lorraine Plumans from ZSI, the Social Center for Innovation in Austria, which I would like really to thank a lot together with Isabella Wagner for really the coordination of this workshop as well. Lorraine, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you, Martina. So I will introduce to you the session 2 very shortly, which is a session that focuses on the state of research in Europe and in the EU and in Canada. And we asked for this session 3 Canadian researchers and 3 European researchers to present to us their projects or initiatives that are happening in their region or country, or any particularities that are relevant for next generation cities research in the context of this workshop. We really hope for this session to set the base for the work that we are going to do together tomorrow. And I'm very happy to first welcome the Canadians, and then we will switch to the Europeans to switch it up a bit from what we had before. I will just, as a small reminder, everyone has 10 minutes as we are short on time. I will turn off my camera, and when you see me reappearing, it would mean that your time is running out, and then you only have 1 more minute. Of course, we can be a bit flexible, but we really try to give everyone the opportunity to speak as long as they have planned. So without further ado, I will give the floor to Alexandra Flynn, which is an assistant professor at the Aller School of Law at the University of British Columbia. And I will start sharing your slide, and please let me know when you want me to switch slides. Here you go, Alexandra.
Thank you so much, and hello to everybody. It's wonderful to join you from Vancouver. So I'm grateful to live and work on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples, who are the Coast Salish peoples that live in this area. And I'm going to come back to First Nations in a moment, because I think it's really relevant to our discussion about cities and about how we have healthy and grounded cities, not just in the Canadian context, but wherever we happen to be coming from. And this really builds on many of the comments that have been made so far about really understanding the local realities of urban spaces, as well as the constraints that affect what is able to happen at the local scale. So the focus of my 10 minutes is going to be on intergovernmental relationships, and especially as they relate to both big and small infrastructure projects. And so I define infrastructure pretty broadly to include, kind of the nuts and bolts of what we imagine as infrastructure, like cars and trucks and buildings and that kind of thing, but also broadband and housing, which I think are really critical when we talk about next generation cities. And I just want to say at the outset, what a tremendous pleasure it is to be speaking with folks from the European Union. There, as Rosalind mentioned early on in our time together, there's so many things that bring together EU and Canadian researchers, including our shared values and shared constitutional realities. And one of those realities happens to be the many scales that are involved in the projects that we're going to be talking about today. So next slide. So what I first, I guess, want to highlight is that in the Canadian context, we are really deeply affected by a constitution that is quite, some constitutional scholars get cranky with me when I say this, but are quite antiquated. Our Constitution was crafted over 150 years ago, and it's extremely difficult to change. We don't have an easy amending formula in our Constitution. And so the result is, when we talk about our cities being 82% of the Canadian population, that's a complete inversion from the time that the Constitution was initially crafted. And so we don't have an umbrella of legal tools that represents the policy reality in the Canadian context. And that's very difficult when we start talking about how the national scale or the EU scale can help in addressing local reform. It makes it really difficult. And so I guess what I'm going to be arguing, and I only have 7 minutes left, so I'm going to, kind of fly through it, but I just want to be very clear that we really need to address the challenges that exist at the constitutional scale. There are so many interesting and important things that are happening at the city level, notwithstanding the constraints of the Constitution. Cities are left dealing with the most wicked of policy problems that we have, whether they're tent encampments or the effects of climate change with flooding, all the way to innovative community practices. But we don't really have a good legal infrastructure for the federal level of government at the Canadian scale to engage with cities. And that's, I argue, a really big problem when it comes to regulating policy areas. So if you can move to the next slide. So cities face very specific challenges. This includes the lack of power to make broad changes. At the Canadian scale, cities are, as we call it, creatures of the province. So they are bound by provincial levels of government, but this has two sides to it. One is that cities can only do what provinces dictate they can do, but at the same time, it constrains the federal level of government from engaging with cities directly. So sometimes provinces have kind of yielded their stick and said, cities are ours. And so it makes it very difficult for the federal government to know how to engage. So it's a problem on two prongs. They also may not have adequate finances or adequate revenue sources. Poor coordination is a significant issue. So this is addressing the multilateral nature of wicked problems like housing, like broadband, like infrastructure, like the climate, like addressing climate change, where multiple levels of government are involved. And so sometimes everybody's coming to the table wanting to take part in crafting solutions, but sometimes everybody's kind of taking a step back and saying that the problem belongs somewhere else. And then there's the lack of government structures for coordination. And this is especially an issue in our largest cities where, we have the local, which is important, but we also have the regional. And so for matters like public transportation, for example, regional levels of government can become a big challenge. So moving to the next slide. The federal government, given this difficulty in engaging with the local level, has tried to navigate with a number of different approaches. And so we've heard about some of these approaches already with Marissa's wonderful presentation. But I just want to highlight some of the specific ways that the federal government has engaged. And this is to help kind of guide our conversation moving forward. So one method of the federal government engaging with the local level has been in the area of infrastructure funding, which is to have direct contractual relationships with cities. So saying, we have this pot of money, we're going to allocate the funding to cities directly. Cities will need to report back to us, but these are one-on-one relationships with municipal governments directly. Or through a cooperative like AMO, which is the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, that will collect and then distribute the funding. So the advantages of this kind of model is that it doesn't violate the Constitution. It makes it much easier to engage. But the challenges are around reporting requirements and many of the matters that we've heard about today, where it becomes very difficult to have good oversight in a way that doesn't burden the municipal sector. A really good building block in addressing those kinds of challenges is seen through the National Housing Strategy, which is a newer innovation in the Canadian context, where the National Housing Strategy replaces about a dozen previous program areas that the federal government had that affected the municipal sector into one place that really brings together all of these different discrete fundings, has an advisory board to have oversight, and integrates, really importantly, accountability officers into the mix. And this is enabled through bilateral agreements with provinces. So again, this is a way of kind of bypassing the constitutional structure that we have through engaging directly at the provincial level, who then provides funding to the local level. And then finally, the Broadband Fund. So again, another new initiative that's trying to address tremendous digital exclusion that exists in northern and rural areas in Canada, but also within cities where poor neighborhoods just don't have broadband accessible digital infrastructure. As we know now, especially with this COVID time, is critical for individuals to be able to access the economy, social life, etc. And so this is another place where the federal government has provided funding, but doesn't unfortunately have a retooling of the overall structure to address some of the constraints that we have in the broadband sector, which I'm happy to talk about later. So I'm just going to move to slide 5 and just conclude with a few takeaways that I think ground the conversation that we have around the federal role when it comes to enabling cities. So first of all, cities must be understood as crucial partners, not just because the federal level might have strategies that it wants to roll out, but because there's already so much happening at the local scale, whether it's cities, and we haven't had time to talk about it, but also First Nations and Indigenous communities are addressing and are at the front lines as accountable governments in fixing these issues. So we need to actually not just engage with cities, but understand them as the experts in these areas. Second of all, the federal government should have its own goals and objectives in what they want to achieve. Obviously, that's important, but it needs to be grounded with a strong understanding of what's actually taking place and based on the 5 criteria that I've laid out here, which include making sure that there is sufficient authority and resources for the locality, but also integration and oversight, as well as a nimbleness. And I'm just going to conclude with one final point, which is that, a lot of the issues, in my view, between the federal and local scale have to do with the antiquated constitution that we have. And in my view, not accepting that as a long-term constraint, but understanding that that can change. There is room for that to change. And bringing back the constitutional level as something that we have to work with is critical. So in our conversations, I hope we come away with the view that we're not stuck with the constitutional structures that we have, but there is room for change in addressing the constraints that are there. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexandra, for this great presentation. I think gives a really good and a specific perspective also on the legal issues. I will now invite Walter Merida to take the floor. I will stop sharing, and Walter has shared with me the desire to share his own slides. Walter Merida is professor at the Department of Mechanical Engineering at the University of British Columbia. And here I give the floor to you.
Thank you very much. Can you see my slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, good morning, good afternoon, and it's a real pleasure to join the workshop today. And I would also like to thank the organizers for the opportunity to participate. Like Alexandra indicated, I have the privilege of joining you from our Vancouver campus, which is located on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Musqueam people. And I would like to share with you a basic idea, which is using the university campus as a laboratory to accelerate the innovation required in cities. And I will give you the overall picture of the initiative, Then I will share 3 quick examples of projects going on right now. And then I will spend a little bit more time talking about one of my projects, which I am leading at the moment, and is more focused on the energy, the interface of the civil infrastructure, transportation, and energy. So this is a picture of the Vancouver campus. And as you can see, we are out in the peninsula. This is Vancouver here on the top. And despite being next to one of Canada's largest cities, UBC is in many respects a remote community. Now, that may seem like a funny thing to say, but what I mean by that is that, as you can see, we are separated from the city by a park. We are out here at the extreme of the peninsula. We own and operate our own gas and electricity networks, our garbage collection, water services, and so on. And for all intents and purposes, we are a small municipality. And in an interesting way, I think what Alexandra just covered this is an example of how a municipality can actually engage with federal programs in a very meaningful and productive way. Now, one of the key things I wanted to highlight is that UBC is the first university in Canada to have a sustainability program. And we have actually managed to reduce our Vancouver campus emissions by approximately 38%, while at the same time growing in student population by about 26%, and in the number of buildings and square footage by about 16%. So I think this challenge of growing in population and construction while at the same time reducing our emissions is a challenge that's shared across many cities around the world. And one of the key things we have done is to use our entire campus as a living laboratory, and critically, we have managed to join our research and operations teams to work together on advanced research and innovation. So I'm going to just show you very, very quickly 3 quick examples of some of the projects that have happened already. And the first one is the construction of an 18-story wooden building. And this was a pioneering project in Vancouver that UBC started to build this residence here. And as you can see from the video, the building was built in a very short time after, of course, the initial concrete structure was completed. And at the end of the day, building this building with wooden products instead of concrete resulted in about 2,400 metric tons of CO2 avoided, and it used approximately 2,200 cubic meters of wood products. Now, that sounds like a lot of wood, but just to give you a sense, the US and Canadian forests will grow this much wood in about 6 minutes. Building this building this way was the equivalent of taking 511 cars off the road for 1 year, or provide the energy to operate 222 houses for 1 year. And that was just one of the projects at UBC. We are now embarked on a more ambitious project in the south end of the campus to build one of Canada's largest passive house residential buildings. And again, we are going to link the endowment lands in the campus to secure research funding for research. And in addition to the technology and all the heating and high efficiency heat pumps and energy dashboards and so on, we're also going to look at some of the challenges that I think Alexandra went through in terms of how to actually go through the technical and regulatory barriers to deploy these technologies and solutions at scale. The next project I wanted to share with you is a project led by Dr. Alex Bigazzi in our School of Community and Regional Planning, and he has a joint appointment between the School of Community and Regional Planning and the Department of Civil Engineering. And these joint positions are an example of how we try to take the more multidisciplinary approach in solving these challenges. In Vancouver, we have a lot of bike paths and trails. And one of the things that Dr. Bigazzi is doing is trying to link the amount of pollution inhalation that people would have by biking or running or walking through a certain parts of the city. And we are going to start using the amount of pollution inhaled as a metric to select and evaluate projects in addition to the technology and financing considerations. So the last project that I wanted to share with you is the project that I am leading at the University of British Columbia. And this is an example of taking an entire city block. So we have taken a city block at the corner of Thunderbird Boulevard and Westbrook Mall. And this city block contains a 4-story parking building, which is here. It has the pharmacy building, And then it has the campus energy center, which is the place where we have some natural gas boilers that provide heat to a portion of the campus. We also have a substation, which is where all the power is managed as it comes into the campus. And we're going to convert this city block into a smart energy district. And we are going to do that by I think, addressing one of the biggest opportunities as we look at the design of the cities of the future. And that is the opportunity to stop thinking of transportation and civil infrastructure assets as passive things that just sit there doing nothing. If you think about the parking garage, it fills with cars at 9 a.m. It stays full of cars until 5 p.m. And basically, both the cars and the building are sitting there doing nothing but just holding the cars. What we are going to do is we are going to aggregate as many electric vehicles as we can into this single building, and then we are going to make the charging infrastructure for those electric vehicles reversible. And what we have effectively done by doing that is we have created a city-scale battery by using a small percentage of the battery capacity in the electric vehicles to perform energy storage operations. And I hope it works, but I think the best way to show you will be to show you a quick video that shows how the technologies are integrated together. So as I said, we are installing about 1 megawatt of solar photovoltaic generation capacity on the roof, not because solar energy makes a lot of sense in British Columbia at 4 to 6 cents a kilowatt hour from hydroelectricity, but because photovoltaic generation technologies have very good cost and performance models that we can use to explore new business models that will emerge out of this combination. We will make, as I said, the recharging infrastructure reversible so that the cars can both be charged by the grid, but they can also return power to the grid once they are operated. And you can imagine that this is going to create a new business model, a new business opportunity, because who gets paid for what will have to be completely transparent to both the car owner and the parking garage operator. Next to the parking garage, we are building a hydrogen electrolyzer, a water electrolyzer, sorry, that will split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And some of the hydrogen will be used to refuel heavy and light duty vehicles, but some of the hydrogen we plan to use to inject it into the natural gas grid that powers the boilers in the campus energy center. And what we have done by doing this is diluting, if you like, the natural gas, the carbon content of the natural gas with hydrogen. Of course, once all these technologies are working, they're going to be connected by UBC's wireless networks. We are the first 5G campus in Canada, and we are going to mirror the Wi-Fi operation of this city block through the 5G network. Once we have the physical layer figured out, we are going to create a digital twin of that city block. And the hope is to start working with cities to translate this knowledge into real operations. We're also going to be looking at the connection of the SkyTrain, which is planned to come into the university, and then looking at ways to link the transportation assets with this energy generation assets in the city. As you know, Vancouver is the largest port in Canada, and I'm just almost done. I see that I only have 1 minute, and we plan to extrapolate some of this new knowledge into the port operations and other operations with freight, for example. Before the pandemic hit us, we were in conversations with Melbourne, with Monash University in Melbourne, to replicate these platforms in Melbourne and to start sharing best practices and comparing legislative and code and installation barriers on both sides of the Pacific. So with that, I would like to close, and I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Walter. I think it's a very interesting presentation of this very forward-thinking campus that you have in Vancouver. I would like to give the floor now to Jeff Brooks and Paul Villeneuve from Canoe or Canoe, I'm not sure I say it properly, apologies if that's the case, at the University of Toronto. I will start sharing their presentation now. And if I can also invite you to make use of the chat if you have questions to one another presentation, because we don't have so much time for questions, unfortunately. And on the floor to Jeff and Paul.
Hi, thanks very much for the invitation to be part of this. I'm coming from you from a small community north of Toronto, where I'm able to see regularly the farthest west European settlement in Canada as of 1640, a place called Ste. Marie among the Hurons. And I'm here residing in the land of the Wendat and the Beausoleil First Nations. Greatly appreciate what they've left for us. I want to talk briefly about the Canadian Urban Environmental Health Research Consortium. Paul Villeneuve and I are doing this together. I'm starting, and the next slide will be great to see now. These are big questions that I know that we are all here to talk about. How to wisely invest in our green transitions to improve health at the same time. So there is much to be thought about in terms of co-benefits as we make major changes. Co-benefits mean, understanding more about the connections between health and various aspects of the urban environment or the environment at large. And where we come in is how to best compile and share environmental data to be able to help address all of these questions. Next slide, please. Our origins are from an extensive planning that the CIHR undertook over the last decade, starting in around 2011, thinking about an initiative in environmental health and what that would look like. So there were a number of series of national workshops that came to a national forum in 2013, and then eventually to a vision that there was a need to foster more environmental data getting into existing health research cohorts, and also with the vision that focusing on cities was the way to go. And that's where the urban environmental comes into Canoe. But there were big challenges and research happening in silos, and a real push to want to have more integration across disciplines and researchers. That brought us to then 2016 when Canoe as a national consortium was funded by CIHR. Next slide. So in a big overview, this is really what we're about. So this is a pan-Canadian effort. There are many researchers across disciplines that are contributing, but the core of it is to work more to standardize environmental data, focusing on cities, such as data like air pollution, areas of greenness, areas of access to transportation and walkability, so on and so forth, to focus on bringing these data together in a consistent manner for the entire country. And from there also to make them interoperable in terms of being linkable to our health data platforms so that we could accelerate the environmental health research space to more holistically look at the connections and not one exposure at a time, as was happening often. So where we're at in terms of that is Canoe is building the data sets and making them available, but then also working very actively with our major health research platforms to have the data for the health research areas. So there are a number of large health platforms that we work with quite extensively. A very large aging cohort, the Canadian Longitudinal Study of Aging, a very large population-based cohort known as CanPath, and a large birth cohort known as CHILD. These all house the same data, Canoe data, and the data are also available to a number of administrative databases that are actively used in Canada quite extensively. And this has really sparked quite a bit of new research through this way, making data that health researchers normally wouldn't know where to go to get. And there's some examples of the numbers of variables and data requests that we've been meeting over the few years that we've been in existence. Next slide. So really, before we felt that the landscape was individual researchers there on the left, working on their environmental exposures of interest, individually going to health data holders, doing the linkage, doing the studies. And at the end of the result was there were good research happening, but it was difficult to compare across studies or to reproduce them. To reuse the data required sort of individual contacts. So there was quite a bit of redundancies in the work that was being done. Certainly it wasn't as efficient as it could be. Next slide. I think over the few years that we've been in existence, we've now been able to transform this. Certainly the old way is not bad in terms of the innovation that it sparks, but in terms of being able to really think about the fair data principles, we've made some major strides forward through Canoe. And now we're able to focus more on the data more holistically across disciplines, bring it right into the health data platforms, link it, and then distribute it as requested. So now we've got standardized linking approaches, standard metrics, studies that can be more easily reproduced. More researchers are able to get access to it. And so as we've built this, we are seeing that they are coming in terms of requesting the data, and we're able to track this work more effectively. Next slide. That is, as I said, leading to more opportunities for research and opportunities that allow us, with common data that focuses on the environment in urban areas, to study disease development across the life course, from prenatal through adolescence into early life, early adulthood, and into aging. And these are some examples of a number of the research questions that Canadian researchers are working on, and able to do that now, as I said, with sort of consistent data. We're really, I think, facilitating this move towards spatial life course epidemiology as research that needs to help inform the best way to transform cities. Next slide. Now I'm going to turn it over to Paul Villeneuve for a bit of an example of some of the work that he's been leading.
Thank you, Jeff. And before proceeding, I'd also like to acknowledge that Carleton University campus is on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. But as mentioned, I'd like to talk a little bit about how valuable the Canoe data platform has been to conducting epidemiological research. The Canoe data have been able to be linked to a number of epidemiological health databases, as Jeff has mentioned, but these have occurred both on a local, a provincial, and a national level. And these studies have shown how important the features of the built environment are for climate neutral cities, how important features of the built environment may play a role in reducing emissions and pollution. Some of the studies that we have done, for example, on urban greenness, has shown that greenness in cities plays an important part in encouraging physical activity. It's played a role on reducing the risk of adverse birth outcomes, and also associated with outcomes such as mortality. There's also been data from Canoe that has shown that neighborhood walkability is linked to lower rates of obesity, physical activity, and active community. Also, noise in urban areas in Canada has been associated with a number of cardiovascular endpoints. An emerging exposure of interest in urban areas has been the role of blue space and its impacts on mental health and mortality rates. Next slide, please. So in addition to looking at health outcomes, the Canoe data has been invaluable for looking at relationships between various environmental exposures in urban areas. And the Canoe data has been used to complement local exposure fieldwork studies. For example, in Ottawa, we have done work that has shown relationships between greenness and air pollution, and how vegetation in an urban area can play an important role in terms of reducing the impacts of urban heat islands, which is quite relevant in terms of climate change impacts. We've also done work in Montreal with local monitoring, and we've used Canoe data to complement analysis that has shown how different types of vegetation may produce greater benefits in terms of reducing urban noise. So altogether, Canoe has provided a lot of helpful, valuable data to inform on epidemiological research. And as mentioned in some of the earlier talks, I think we're now at a stage where we need to move forward with newer measures of these environmental exposures, as well as consider doing more interventional type of research to quantify some of those benefits. And I'll turn it back to you, Jeff. Next
Thanks,
slide,
Paul.
please.
Yeah, thank you. So, we really are much about how to use these data to help be part of the change. And I really like the mention of the needs to be at the local level and to hear what people in the cities need and how to get there. And certainly a clear aspect of what cities need is to be able to efficiently address inequities that exist of all sorts and types. This is an example of a recent paper on the bottom left there, where we took some of the data that are collected in Canoe, and then we're able to match it with Statistics Canada information from the census on socioeconomic position in the country and deprivation, for example, in this case, and see where some of the more acute inequities reside in multiple cities. So one of the advantages, of course, is that we're now able to do this in a more standardized way through the investment in developing Canoe. And this is one of our steps towards mobilizing the data. So we saw about the abilities to advance epidemiology and understanding of the connections, but we really want to be doing much more with what we've built. And one of the new directions that we're going is through building up tools which can be accessed easily through your computer or even your smartphone, healthyplace.city and healthyplan.city, that will start to bring these data together and explain what they mean to inform more people, whether it be right down to the local neighborhoods for how they might get more engaged in improving their environment or get more engaged in speaking to the decision makers. And also data that can be brought together so some communities that don't have as much data as the large cities do can be on par with what the large cities have. So that's what they're doing with this Equity and Built Environment Tool project. Last slide, I think. So, currently we've expanded the efficiency of research in Canada. We're working to really build in, ways to be able to move towards healthy, equitable cities and the complex interactions that are there, move much more into sustainability and climate adaptation in the future ahead. So there's much more capacity than there was before in terms of using the health data platforms and accessing and mobilizing data. We're winding down our first 5 years of work, but we've been really looking closely at, what are the opportunities ahead. As I said, we're building ways to mobilize the data, and there are many opportunities. I hope for us to think about sharing experiences and learning across the Atlantic. We recently published this editorial with the leaders of the Gecko Network, which is a very similar platform based in the Netherlands, about possible future directions to go to, I think, work even more harmoniously across the pond. So thanks very much for your attention. Look forward to discussions during this workshop.
Thank you very much, Jeff and Paul, for this great presentation of Canoe. And I will, without further ado, introduce Denise Sarakianis, I hope I say it properly, which is the project coordinator of the EU project Icarus. Denise, I don't know if you have slides to share or...
Yes, actually I do.
Yes.
I'm just trying to get the button to come up, but yeah, there it is. Give me 1 second.
So you have the opportunity to kickstart the European presentations today of this session, and I let you proceed.
Thanks a lot, Laura. It's a very interesting session anyway, the whole day. So thanks a lot for the organization. I really was very happy to see also what Jeff just showed, because it's very relevant to what we have been doing in Europe with this regard. So Icarus is a project that has just ended. Actually, it was about trying to tackle at the same time climate change and air pollution and air quality in cities, focusing on the health aspects and the well-being aspects in this regard. So what I'm going to try to summarize in this short presentation is a little bit our objectives, and of course one was the question of assessing and quantifying the impact of a number of policies, both current and alternative policies in terms of reducing greenhouse gas emissions and improving air quality in the European cities. To evaluate what are the current contributions of the different pollution sources, actually in a really EU-wide sense, to employ new and emerging wearable sensor technologies and innovative approaches to refine estimates of individual exposure. So indeed trying to look at how to enhance, if you want, the science basis, the citizen science basis for environmental health. And in this sense, to provide with policymakers with targeted recommendations on what are the most relevant measures to take in order to improve at the same time air quality and climate forcing and reducing climate forcing in order to mitigate population exposure, and develop visions in the end of smart, green, and healthy cities in the very much along the lines of the new mission in Horizon Europe, as mentioned previously by Dr. Frassa, with a minimum environmental and health impact, and actually develop a pathway towards implementing these visions over the next 50 years. So this is this was the basic point, but the most important probably is this last bullet here, and that is to raise awareness on the one hand awareness, but and more importantly of citizens and public authorities regarding air quality and the health impact in cities, but more importantly to motivate citizens to adopt alternative behaviors and thus not only be engaged in the citizen science of the issue, but actually engage into changing behaviors that will actually alter the ultimate profile in terms of air quality and climate change. This is our methodological approach. It is trying to be as encompassing as possible, essentially looking at the number of sectors of activities in cities that cover, of course, that are linked to airborne emissions, both of greenhouse gases and of pollutants. We're trying to integrate the two data sets following FAIR principles, as mentioned previously, indeed by Jeff, looking at modeling both the exposure and the air quality, and the climate, the carbon footprint, but then also going down the road of modeling individual exposure, capturing it on the individual basis with a number of different wearable sensors and both remote and wearable sensors, and essentially using advanced agent-based modeling and data fusion approaches to actually move into the actual uptake of air pollutants in terms of the individual citizen, and finally going down the road of estimating intake in the lung, in the respiratory system, and linking this then with based on epidemiological data with actual health impacts. We also move towards monetizing the impact on health and on climate forcing and how this affects health as well indirectly, to have also the ability to produce with to derive for policymakers also monetary values of these impacts. Of course, the analysis is not based only on money. It is based on a multidimensional, multivariate approach, but we felt it was very important in terms of communication, in terms of sort of really bringing about change to actually make that last step. In terms of the quantification of the impact of different policies, besides developing, of course, an innovative framework for this, we had to actually develop emission inventories for a large array of cities across Europe, EU 28 plus Switzerland and Norway, on a top-down level, and for the 9 cities participating in the project from a bottom-up approach perspective at a very high spatial resolution at 1 by 1 kilometer, taking into account a life cycle approach with regard to emissions. And then actually, I think this is a pretty innovative part of the project, and that because, as far as I know, it's one of the very few, if not the only one, which has actually managed to indeed couple air pollution modeling with climate modeling in the city, and actually on a very long period of time, up to the end of 2050 and actually the end of the century, in order to ensure that what we are assessing is consistent with climate change scenarios, and that these scenarios, vice versa, are affected by the changes we are talking about on the city level. The next step had to do with actually developing a number of databases of policies and measures, which of course is already a resource for policymaking across Europe. As you see, we have included a number of almost 700 plus potential policies and measures. We've analyzed about 50 of them, which were actually selected together with the stakeholders locally. And then we went through integrated quantitative impact assessment of the 5 policies and measures we ultimately selected for each of the 9 Icarus cities, so 45 with a full-blown assessment. In this regard, we actually moved down the road of evaluating the specific contribution of different pollution sources on not just the classic pollutants, PM10 to 2.5, but actually doing also detailed speciation analysis down to PM1 and actually BP, polyaromatic hydrocarbons, metals and whatnot. So really going down the road of linking sources to actual individual exposures and risks. Using, as you saw, different types of innovative techniques. I think one key innovation here had to do, which is widely usable right now also in Europe, and that is a combination of in situ local remote and wearable sensors with pretty large participation, about I think about 700 participants actually, with more than about 300 households across in each city. So we actually had a pretty large array of responses and engagement of the actual citizens to not just the responses, but actually the science, because this was done together with the people engaged in the project. This ended up to actually providing targeted recommendations for policymakers on measures to take up for improving air quality and climate change mitigation. And that included, of course, a series of workshops, continuous feedback loops, essentially an urban living lab approach with the citizens as well to ensure that actually this is really being something that can be taken up at the local level. It has had this kind of influence right now. And in this regard, we also moved on to try to develop what you might call visions of smart, green, and healthy cities over the extended period of time, over the next 50 years. So not just looking at the next 20 or 30 years, but actually looking down the road. In a series of workshops locally with local stakeholders and citizens, and of course the authorities, and finally ended up with a number of few focused narrative visions of smart, green, and healthy cities, and also identify the pathways to the transition to these sort of visions on the basis of the consultation and in collaboration with the city stakeholders. One key point, I think, was the increase in citizen awareness and also public authority awareness about the importance of air quality and the link with health, but also the link with climate change and health. So here we had a number of meetings, SLAM events, but more importantly than even 2 international conferences. These are the more like the classic, if you want, approaches towards communication dissemination. I think what's more interesting is the first bullet here, and that is that we also developed 2, I think, important pieces of software. One is a decision support system for policymakers and public authorities in order to assess strategies for addressing air quality and climate change. Another one is a mobile app, which is called R Quality. It is actually available to you over on the Apple Store and the Google Market Store. And this actually app is an app that is made up to give you not just individual, local, on-the-spot, on-site air quality information, but also give you, on the basis of, if you're using a smartphone, essentially on the basis of tracking your movement rate, an estimation of your individual intake rate of these pollutants at the moment you're checking the app. The idea is to actually give very personalized information on air quality and how this. We also explain, of course, what this means in terms by way of public health. The idea is to actually make individual citizens be aware of what it means to them to modulate their pollution and their habits, and that is then linked to a module that actually relates to the individual carbon footprint estimator that is linked to also the effects on air pollution. So it is actually is a two-way sort of kind of feedback towards the citizen, one on the air pollution exposure and a second one on the carbon footprint, allowing people to assess, if you want, the individual impact of their behavior, with also a dimension that has to do with gamification, so trying to produce benefits to the participating citizens when they change their behavior. So we've used that, obviously, in the last year and more. By now, we had to deal with COVID-19. So we also had a section where we used all these tools for COVID-19 research. This is an example of calculations in Greece on the famous reproduction number over a period of time, over essentially the whole year. Of COVID-19 on the basis of data from Icarus, and this is actually real Icarus data on air pollution levels in COVID-19 and also COVID-19 related mitigation measures, which again does show allowed us to draw interesting conclusions with regard to these impacts. We had a specific study on how pollution affects morbidity and mortality from COVID-19, which again shows how, if you have the data infrastructure and the modeling infrastructure, it is possible to pretty fast, enhance the impact of these kind of tools in order to actually, in the end of the day, as I said, bring about real change. Because as you see in the first bullet here, one of the key examples was the air quality plans in Madrid and in Milan, two big metropolitan areas in southern Europe, which have already based their air quality plans partially on work from Icarus. We worked together with them on this. We're working together with the urban resilience strategies in Athens and Thessaloniki for 2030, and we've actually already contributed. Actually, we were at the scientific as project, the scientific coordinator for the climate change adaptation plans for two of the most important regions in the country.
Denise, sorry to interrupt. Can I ask you to wrap up, because we're really running out of time?
It's two more slides. So, in terms of actual work, we actually worked on specific measures, as I said before. So questions that not only relate to air pollution, but also to waste, or also issues that relate to digitalization, to questions that have to do with environmental health. But again, for us, the most important point was the question of citizen awareness and the link with health and well-being. In this regard, we're actually in the process of moving on to a new project, which is called Urbanome. This is just started. It's a follow-up to Icarus. It's one more Horizon 2020 project, and that's that is actually bringing this to more to the health area, health and well-being, in terms of building an urban observatory for allowing people to assess urban health and well-being on the basis of the technology and the know-how from Icarus. And this is actually the focus here is indeed urban living labs and citizen engagement, citizen science, following a quadruple helix approach, including citizens, industry, local stakeholders, and authorities in science. I'll close with that. And with this picture, I think this is probably the best way to close at that time. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Denise. I think we can quickly jump back to Julio Lamberas, which is the Vice Rector for Internationalization at the Polytechnic University of Madrid. I will share your slide and I will let you go, and let's try to be on time.
Thank you, Laurent. Thank you, everyone, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to talk a bit today. And I'll try to be a bit shorter because we are running out of time, right? So we only have 3 minutes. So I'll try to do it in, I mean, it would be impossible in 3 minutes, but at least 7 minutes. So if you can go ahead. Yeah, thank you. So I'll talk a bit about how we can finance and implement a new governance system for large-scale urban transformation. And I just want to build on what other people said before, both Marisa, Philippe, and many others, on how this urban transformation is a complex and systemic issue. So we know now that we cannot do this and urban transformation with business as usual solutions, right? We cannot implement just projects in a very traditional way, because that's only an incremental change, but we need an exponential change. We need a systemic change to really transform cities. So, and to do that, I think we need a new finance and governance system. So the first elephant in the room, if you can move forward, is how much this will cost. And I'm here as a member of the European Cities Mission Board. You already heard about this from Rosalind, from Philippe, and in some conversations. And we estimated, thanks to a work done by Material Economics, on what's the cost or the investment needed to transform these 100 cities by 2030. And the estimations is that we need 96,000 million euros, so 96 billion euros to transform these cities. And you can see the split there. No, please, thank you, on the different sectors. And the good news is that benefits are higher than costs. Even direct benefits, net cost savings, are almost the same as cost, 90 compared to 96. And if we include the co-benefits, the net benefits are greater than the cost. But the problem here is that costs need to be done upfront at the beginning of the transformation, and benefits will come in the next years. And that's one first thing to think of, and I'll come back to this later on new business models that we need. And if you move forward, please. But the first thing we can ask when we think about, 96 billion euros, it's a lot of money for 100 cities. And for example, this Horizon Europe program will only finance 1 billion at maximum, right? So it's less than around 1% of the money needed. So how can we spend this money, and who should spend and invest this money? And the first thing is that we tend to think that cities and the public bodies are the stakeholders that need to spend this money. But with the same research done by Material Economics, we can see that public bodies, so cities, should only spend 17% of this money as an average. I mean, some cities it's even less than 10%. So this is not about public investment. Public investment will catalyze the transformation and will create the seeds and will plant the seeds for this transformation. But the main money should come from citizens, property owners, and other authorities and other private sector, right? So it's all about engaging the private sector. It's not about only investing public money. And that's very important, because we need to transform the way we do things to engage and attract private money. And when we talk about private money, I'm not talking just about companies investing in the cities, but also citizens. When they buy a new car, they can spend the money in a petrol car, or they can spend the money in an electric vehicle. When they retrofit building, they can do one thing or the other. And this kind of investment are critical for this transformation. So if you go to the next one, these are the main types of investments. Of course, we know all the public investment that we are doing in cities. So through budget, mainly local budget, but other budget like national. We were hearing some federal ideas as well. We are talking about grants, loans, and other types of funds. But as I said, this is only 17%, right? Or less than that. but we have to focus on the private investment and how can we leverage this money. And then I think it's important, as I was saying before, to divide between companies and citizens. And companies are eager to invest in sustainable cities, in transformation of cities, but we need to create the environment to do that. We need to prepare the ground to receive this investment. But there are lots of sustainable funds and other funds, private equity funds and other funds that are really willing, are eager to invest in the cities. But as I said before, it's not only about companies, it's also about citizens, for example, investment in private assets, or there are some cities that are starting new ways of funding, like crowdfunding, or even donations or philanthropy, which is not very typical in Europe, but it's a great instrument that it's being used in other places like the US and so forth. So this is the big picture on investment and finance, but we also want to talk about another elephant, and maybe instead of two elephants, we can talk about a giraffe, as the rapporteur of the cities mission said in a conference. So we also have a giraffe here, which is the governance. We need a new governance to do that. It's not just about funding money, it's about having a new way of governing the system. And then there are three principles that we think are important. One is the holistic approach. We have to break down silos. We cannot continue just financing and implementing projects on a silo, with a silo approach on transportation or buildings. We need to connect all these projects to a portfolio approach. We need a multi-level governance, and that's on the right-hand side of this slide, is similar to what other presenters were saying before. So in our case, when we talk about Europe, we need to combine and work at the three levels: at the local level, at the national or member state level, and at the European level. And we need to combine these three layers and work together and work on the systemic approach, both at regulation, financing, fiscal issues, and so forth at the three levels, right? And finally, we need, and I think that's maybe the most critical thing, we need to create a real and deep and continuous and radical collaboration between all stakeholders. We need to put everyone together, both the local, the civil servants at the city hall or the city level, also researchers, private sector people, and civil society citizens to work together, which is really, really hard. I think that's the most difficult thing. And how can we do that? Next slide, and last one. So I think we can do 6 things, and I have some examples of what we are doing at different places in Europe, and I will focus on Madrid because I'm from Madrid and we are working with the city a lot on this. First is, I think we need to build administrative and policy capacity to work together, to implement a new governance system, to work with the private sector, to attract these investments. We need a different mindset. So we need to create this capacity. We need to spend money on teaching and working with the policymakers and with the civil servants on this. And I think that's critical. And one example is in Madrid, there is interdepartmental group working together from 6 different departments of the city council on the transformation of the city. And it's hard to collaborate between different departments, but it's critical, and they need some education for that, or some learning process. Second, and many of you also talked about this, is the narrative. So we need to link these local actions for climate neutrality with other co-benefits. You were talking about air quality, road safety, also noise, and health effects, and so forth. Third, we think it's critical to foster a just transition, including citizens. Logan, I'm ending, sorry. And so I'll go to the fourth. which I think it's maybe the most difficult thing, is creating this platform for a real radical collaboration between actors. So it's about creating ecosystem for systemic innovation. When we talk about systemic innovation, it's the combination of both technological innovation, which is important, but also regulatory innovation, fiscal innovation, cultural innovation, and so forth. And you have to create these platforms. And for example, in Madrid, we are working on this. We need to test innovative instruments. And for example, we are doing sandboxes. We are doing living labs and test bed. I love the presentation from Walter before. And this is very important. But with all the layers, not only the technical layer, but also the legal and the cultural layer, and to be to foster a just transition, not just a transition for the richest. For example, another instrument is a cross-department budget, or for example, innovative public procurement or green budgeting, green taxonomy. These are instruments that are very useful, and many cities across Europe are trying to implement these instruments. And finally, I think it's critical to work together, the university with the city. Many cities, many universities are urban universities, and there is a huge potential to work together, because universities are those stakeholders or those actors that can convene different stakeholders that can work together from a neutral position. And an example I love, and it was created at the UBC in Vancouver many years ago, is this City Studio initiative, where students are working with the city civil servants at the city on solving urban problems. And I know that you have now more than 200 students every year working to solve these urban problems with the city. And that's a great way to engage citizens in real problems while transform the city and connect both university and the city. And sorry, I was finally longer than expected. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you, Julio. And I will directly give the floor to Karen. I'm sorry that you have to start so late. I will let you share your slide as desired. And yeah, I will just introduce you as the Secretary General of Police, and I'll let you say more.
Thank you, Laurent, and good evening or good morning, depending on where you are. So I've been asked to talk about integrated urban planning, and specifically with a focus on transport. From our perspective, what are the most important developments and emerging trends? And our perspective means the Polis perspective, which is a European network of cities and regions focusing on sustainable urban mobility and urban transport innovation. So when we talk about urban space and transport, we know, of course, that space is scarce in cities and therefore is also very valuable. And also by allocating space to transport modes or not, we can prioritize certain modes or choose not to prioritize other modes. We are facing a very heavy legacy in our cities when it comes to the predominance of space occupation by the private car, something that has been building up for generations. But today we also see increasing demands on urban streets due to new modal options and more sustainable modal options, but also growing mobility-related sectors such as e-commerce, which has been booming even more now during the pandemic. At the same time, we see a very welcome living streets trend, the trend of giving the streets back to the people, of having streets for people rather than for vehicles or cars. And of course, the overarching trend of population densification as well. What it comes down to when we talk about urban space and transport is that we need to make choices and that we need to prioritize. And we know that decisions when it comes to taking away space from one mode or giving more space to another mode tend to be very controversial and sensitive. When we then look at the urban mobility ecosystem in general, we see that we have a lot of expectations and demands and needs being addressed or put on that particular system. And we need to combine all these needs and expectations into one integrated picture where the space dimension very often comes into play as well. And we see that therefore the public authority is moving more and more towards playing the role of the urban space manager. And actually that's a good thing because it's a very powerful tool that public authorities can work with. It links into issues related to land use planning and densification, of course, but also to prioritizing modes through space allocation and reallocation, as I mentioned, but also to putting a price on space. That can be through parking, but also to access regulations. And also what we need to do is more dynamically manage space and the curbside in our cities in particular. A tool that can help us do that and bring everything together into one integrated picture is a so-called Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, a tool and instrument that has been promoted heavily by the European Commission as well for several years. And the Commission has also invested in providing the necessary support instruments for cities to develop and implement and monitor such sustainable urban mobility plans, which allow cities to develop a long-term integrated urban transport vision going beyond political cycles, bringing different sectors and policy domains together, involving citizens, and you really, have this nicely integrated picture that helps you to tackle all these different issues altogether from the different policy challenges as well that cities need to address in the transport field, and there are many, as we all know. Now, let me zoom in on a number of specific aspects when it comes to urban space and transport in our cities. I've also been asked to particularly pay attention to active travel, and I do that with pleasure because we know that cycling and walking are actually the cleanest modes of transport in our cities, and that they also bring several health benefits beyond just the mobility benefits. And that's important also in terms of promoting them, that it's not just for the greater good, but it's also good for yourself in terms of physical activity, for example. It also brings greater quality of life to our cities and links into the trend I mentioned of streets for people rather than for cars. But if we want to capitalize on these benefits from active travel, we also need to make space for these modes. And that means prioritize them in street design and in dedicated and very safe infrastructure, because safety and sustainability go hand in hand in that respect. Here in Europe, we're also seeing a tremendous boom of the e-bike, the electric bike, and that is also extending the range of cycling beyond the typical 5 kilometer. And if that goes hand in hand with infrastructure investments such as supercycle highways, there's a lot of untapped potential still in this particular field. I would also like to point to the health economic assessment tool that was developed by the World Health Organization and is helping cities to quantify the economic benefits brought by active travel. So that's also an important argument for politicians and decision makers to invest more in active travel. And that's also what the European funded research project FLOW has been trying to do, give numbers to politicians and decision makers to justify why they want to invest more in active travel and to show that it has a positive impact on the overarching urban fabric and the overall urban mobility ecosystem. Now, if we then look at the current situation, and COVID's been mentioned a couple of times already, we saw a number of critical factors and threats in this whole situation, such as the collapse of public transport and the car, the threat of returning to the car even more as the ultimate safety bubble, even though that's actually not really the case. But we also see a number of opportunities, and particularly in the field of redistributed space. So what we saw happening across many cities in Europe was a massive respacing of our city streets in favor of active travel to give more room for cyclists and pedestrians. Actually, an intervention which was long overdue, and we actually wouldn't have needed a pandemic to make that change. But it was accelerated because it is a trend that had been observed prior to the pandemic, but really has been put on a fast track, let's say. And we see that especially those cities with very good sustainable urban mobility plans in place have been acting really fast and have been doing impressive things in the field of respacing our city streets. So there is really a momentum for making something happen also on a permanent level. What we now have to do is lock in the temporary interventions that we have seen popping up and make those interventions permanent over time. And I think the momentum is also there in the situation that we're in, because we are going through a life-changing moment. And that's also when they say people are prone to changing their deeply rooted behavior, such as mobility behavior. And at the same time, we are in a huge street experiment, a huge sandbox that we can play with. And winning the hearts and minds of people is very powerful if you can let them experience the impact of new measures, such as respaced city environments. So I'm optimistic that this will bring us something good and also something permanent. What we also have seen over the last couple of years are many new modes coming to our city streets, either existing modes but reformatted in a shared scheme, or really new modes such as e-scooters, for example. And that has also created a number of negative externalities, which has made it important to regulate these new modes, such as e-scooters. We saw a public outcry in the media at some point, like they are polluting urban space, you know, they're cluttering urban space because they're parked everywhere and illegally parked. And of course, that's true, and we need to make sure that we mitigate those negative externalities. But coming back to the elephant that was mentioned also in the previous presentation, we also know what a real elephant in the room is when it comes to space occupation in cities. And in the end, it's not the tiny e-scooter, but it's the private car that has been taking up way too much space, and something that needs to be done as well, as I mentioned, urgently. When we talk about offering alternatives to the private car, we have to make sure that the package of sustainable modes that is available can also be easily combined into intermodal and multimodal options in our cities. And for that, we need physical integration through interchanges and stations and multimodal mobility hubs where all the different options come together and can be easily combined to make our travel as seamless as possible. But we also need digital integration where you can easily book and pay and check the different options available. And that's where mobility as a service comes in, which is a very hot topic right now in Europe and is seen as also an important enabler for making multimodality and intermodality a reality. But also we should not just focus on incentives. We need, beyond the carrots, we also need the sticks. And that also is where pricing comes in, and putting a price on space as well. We see increasingly that cities are introducing all kinds of urban vehicle access regulations. And that can be for reasons of air pollution through low or zero emission zones, but also for reasons of space pollution through congestion charges, for example, or parking management and taking on-street parking away from urban cores. And that's also a very powerful tool where digital enablers, again, can also help to better monitor and enforce these measures. It's also, again, an example of how certain measures tend to be unpopular, but need to be taken if we want to make a step change in cities. What we also need to do is manage the space that we have in our cities more dynamically. And again, digital tools can be helpful in that respect. We need to look at the needs we have at a certain moment in time, during the day, during the night, and the functions that we can allocate to urban space and the curb in particular. And if we more dynamically manage that space, also through the digital layer, this will also make sure that we can free up space for different goals and purposes based on what citizens need and what the transport system needs. That could be food trucks over lunch. It could be pickup and drop-off zones in the evening when people are going out. It could be deliveries in the morning. It could be public transport dedicated lanes during peak hours. So there's a lot of room for making that space management more dynamic. I would like to mention one point as well when it comes to innovations and disruptions, and that is the potential of automation and self-driving vehicles. The urban environment is incredibly complex, and it will be instrumental for cities to set the rules of the game when it comes to automation and anticipate what is coming their way. If we open our city streets to the automated car in the same way as we've done to the private car a couple of generations ago, this new technology is not going to solve anything. You see on this slide that for each potential benefit, there's also a potential threat. And in terms of spatial aspects, there is the risk of urban sprawl and longer commuting as travel time will be perceived differently. So we really have to be careful when we talk about automation readiness for our cities, that we make sure that we use it for the right purpose and in the right context and set the rules of the game today for what will be arriving tomorrow. And let me conclude with something that was also mentioned before when we were talking about the Driving Urban Transitions Partnership. And that is a very positive trend that links in with the Giving the Streets Back to the People movement that I mentioned earlier. And that's the concept of the 15-minute city, where we focus on bringing things closer to the people, where we focus on proximity and try to make sure that all services and needs are being met in an urban environment within this 15-minute range and by walking and cycling. And this is where I think we should move towards when we talk about sustainable urban mobility and a smart use of urban space for that matter. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Karen. It was a great presentation. I hope we had more time to comment on it. I will quickly move to the final words of this session, so to let you all go before we meet again tomorrow. I will just share my screen very quickly. So first of all, thank you all that presented today, and I think it'll be a great base for tomorrow. Tomorrow, most of us are meeting again in the same Zoom link. I will send you another email, which is all with this information included, but it's the same room, so it shouldn't cause any confusion. And we are meeting in 2 different groups. So we first all meet together, and then you'll be assigned to a different group. If anyone here also is here as an observer and would like to participate, it doesn't see their name, please send me an email. I also just wanted to remind you that we have a shared folder that was shared earlier in this meeting. I will also put it again in the chat, where you can find the bios of all the participants and any practical information, such as the Miro instructions for those who have missed maybe the Miro testing session last week, which we will use tomorrow. So I really invite you to make use of this. I will send you again the list of the groups for tomorrow, so that you can have a look if you want at who's going to be in your session. And with this, I will let you go and really thank you very much all for your presence today and the great insight that I'm sure will serve very much tomorrow. And apologies for the delay.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye, Laura.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. Bye, Laura. And the kids.